So when you hear the term "Make America Great Again," what comes to your mind?
Well, for one thing, it's going to depend heavily on who's saying it. So, as we all know, that term is associated heavily with President Trump. And I think that when I hear, and he is a man, a white man of a certain decade, when I hear him say that, it sounds coded, as if he's saying that he wants to take America back to a time when it was great for anyone who was not a white, when it was great for anyone who was a white man.
Sure. I mean, I can agree with that sentiment. We're currently in a highly technologically advanced period. And, it seems like the playing field isn't necessarily level, but at least that inequality is economically based, across the board. So it gives everyone an opportunity to rise, versus the way Trump states it feels like he's referring to a period when opportunities were either blocked, not afforded to everybody, or destroyed if folks were able to inch their way, out of the muck.
True.
Today, we are exploring the strange intersection of Donald Trump's presidential theme with Octavia Butler's novel, The Parable of the Talents. Welcome back to our channel. I'm Haas.
I'm CeCe.
Today we got a hot topic for you.
So welcome back, guys. As we know, it has been a rather crazy month,
Yeah.
Starting out with that crazy debate where Biden and Trump, who, muckety-mucked for different reasons.
Both of them.
And then, of course, we had the very scary and sad thing happen where, someone attempted to take former President Trump's life. And then right after that, Biden says, see y'all, he steps down. And then we're with Kamala Harris, who is now running against former President Trump for the presidency.
Well, it's not that he necessarily stepped down, but he was, urged to step down,
I mean, he was probably shamed into stepping down. Yeah. But I think so. I think a lot of people are having that edge of your seat kind of feeling, because a lot of history has happened in a compressed amount of time. And, what's that quote by Lenin that says that history goes decades with nothing happening, and then it goes days with decades happening?
Actually, the quote is, there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen,
okay,
right?
There we go.
Yeah.
So as Haas already mentioned, today we're here discussing Octavia Butler's intersection with Donald Trump's presidency, or the theme of his presidency. And as we know, Octavia Butler is a prominent Black science fiction writer. She was born in 1947 in Pasadena, California. She was raised by her mother and grandmother. Her father had passed away earlier in her life when she was 7.
Right.
And her mother had been a maid. Her father had been a shoe shiner. So she'd come from very humble beginnings.
Sure. And
but she became an early pillar in the subgenre aesthetic of Black Afrofuturism.
Sure.
And so Afrofuturism was coined by the cultural critic Mark Derry in his essay Black to the Future. And this concept evolved from discussions with author Samuel Dellery, Greg Tate, and historian Tricia Rose.
So in a nutshell, Afrofuturism is a cultural aesthetic that combines several elements together that present the future through the lens of Afrocentricity. Afrofuturism can be expressed through art, creative works, and activism, and can include literature, music, visual art, film, and dance.
And now it can also be a method of self-liberation, self-healing, and can intersect with critical race theory as well as epistemology.
Okay.
And so Afrofuturism works can examine the past, question the present, and imagine optimistic future, and can often use current social movements, as a backdrop, So when you think about that, think about things like films such as Black Panther, and of course my favorite TV show of all time, as well as books, was Lovecraft Country.
And you can also think about musicians such as Sun Ra, who was a music outlier linked with the African American experience with ancient Egyptian mythology and outer space. Sun Ra was years ahead of all other avant-garde musicians in his experimentation with instruments and sound effects. He was a pioneer in group improvisations and the use of electric instruments in jazz. Now, someone else who was in the same stratosphere, but somewhat in a different genre of music, was George Clinton. You know, he was a musician, singer, band leader, producer, and an artist who first rose to fame as part of the music collective Parliament Funkadelic, which produced an avant-garde form of funk music in the 1970s that drew inspiration from science fiction, futuristic fashion, and surrealism. Considered one of the progenitors of Afrofuturism, Clinton's singular aesthetic across genres has attracted followers worldwide.
Wow. So back to Octavia Butler. In 1995, she became the first science fiction writer to be awarded the MacArthur Fellowship. And she hoped to use the MacArthur grant actually to write 4 more books in her series of the Parable series. But she started to feel like the story was too depressing, and so she changed course and she ended up writing a vampire novel of all things, Fledgling, which came out in 2005. And the following year, unfortunately, Butler died unexpectedly when she fell and hit her head outside of her home in North Seattle.
So my favorite Octavia Butler book was Wildseed, which I loved.
Yeah, I want to say that this was the first book after we met that you recommended to me.
So what, did I introduce you to Octavia Butler?
No, you did not. But this book, Wildseed, was out of publication at the time, and this was like in the early 90s, and it was really hard to find.
Okay, so you hadn't heard about Wildseed then?
I mean, I knew the book existed. I mean, I knew of all her books because I had fallen in love with her through reading, Parable of the Sower.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I actually
met me that you heard about. What did you think about Wildseed?
Well, I liked Wildseed. It was a very good book. I think it gave me some insight into your personality.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things that I came away with it was because I think that you were probably drawn to it because it features the characters Doro and Anna Yahoo. What's that her name?
And Yanwu.
And they were shapeshifters, and one lived in the spirit world, one was just kind of a magical, immortal person. Yeah. And I think that presented a certain type of unbridled freedom for you, especially as a young Black man in America.
Sure. I mean, it was also a love story of complexities between immortals. I'm definitely fascinated with the angelic realm, that space is occupied between humans and the great architect.
Yeah.
But, I also read the Parable of the Sowers.
Yeah, and this is a newer version of her book. But, the Parable of the Sowers and the Parable of the Talents is a 2-book series. And
this seems to be her most popular books, though I know she has many, many more novels. But the Parable of the Sower was eerily similar to the rhetoric being used now and the environmental events that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
So I am definitely anxious to reread the Parable of the Talents due to the commonalities that we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, so I would say that these probably are her 2 most popular books. These are definitely the ones that are most studied by academia.
Sure,
I would definitely say that. And but Parable of the Sower was actually her 10th book.
Really?
Yeah, and so it opens in Los Angeles in 2024.
Right.
And the novel unfolds through the journal entries of the protagonist, who is a 15-year-old Black girl named Lauren Olamina. Okay. And she has a condition called hyperempathy, which causes her to feel the pain of others. Okay.
Hyperempathy, you mean as empaths? A lot of people are suddenly going around calling themselves empaths.
Yeah.
Do you mean like this?
Yeah. There seems to be a movement towards that. People saying they're empaths. I'm not saying they're not, whether they're empaths or not, but not everybody can be an empath, but they don't literally mean it in the way that people are saying that they're empaths in today's culture.
Okay.
She literally feels the physical pain of other people.
Okay.
There's global warming in the book, and it has caused a severe drought. And there's rising seawater, and there's a rise in homelessness.
Okay.
So the middle class and the working poor live in like these gated neighborhoods where they fend off the homeless with like guns, and they have these really tall wires and walls. Walls. And I think some of the walls might have some type of electrical wiring in them. And then, you know, water is scarce, so it's as valuable as money.
Okay.
And then pharmaceutical companies have come out and created these things called smart drugs.
Okay.
Which boost mental performance. And then there's the drug pyro, which is a pill that they take, and it gives the person like an erotic rush from setting and watching things burn.
Wait, back up. There is a drug that, you know, gives sexual pleasure from arson. You know, why don't I remember that?
I mean,
so how did that work?
No, I said it was erotic.
Okay.
So like I said, the drug basically turns people into like these maniacal sociopaths, and they go around setting fires, and they get a lot of pleasurable sensation that's supposed to be better than sex, setting the fire.
So theoretically, do you think that's possible?
No, I don't think it. I mean, well, it's completely possible to derive pleasure from watching things burn, but that's a psychological condition called pyromania, which is an uncontrollable compulsion to relieve feelings of tension by burning something. But I don't think it's possible for someone to invent a drug to turn on brain centers that would make someone orgasm from watching a fire.
I wonder what was the purpose of Butler relating orgasmic feelings to pyromania. You know, possibly she pictured a world where the common people unconsciously did the bidding of the powerful, which is not far-fetched. I mean, look what Donald Trump got the people to do at the Capitol. But in the book, these people burned down communities while on this drug, which may have been created as a way to rebirth the world. You know,
maybe
sex is the second strongest urge humans have to hunger, you know, and in this situation, they were able to access that urge with the drug to make them cause destruction. You know, I mean, it's actually quite genius.
I mean, I think we have to be careful here to not say that Donald Trump's people that burned that attacked the Capitol on January 6th were on drugs. They were not on drugs, but I think that
they weren't on drugs, but they was damn high. They was high on something. I tell you that much.
I mean,
in order for them to attack their own country.
Well, I think it was because, you know, in addition to
we're
hunger,
a long way away from the Civil War.
I mean, the thing is that I think that in addition to hunger and sex, that there's also a powerful urge that can be created with fear. And so when you are used to being the status quo or the person that's in power, you're going to react in certain ways to retain that power, you know, especially when you might not have been as nice as you should have been to other people that are in this country. And now you're afraid of being the person that's having done to you what you've done to them.
Sure.
And so I think that when you instill that type of fear into people, they will do that.
But do you think that that's what Donald Trump was doing? Because he had more than just white people in those mobs.
Well, I mean, I think it's, and you're right. I don't think it's just about race exactly. I think that Donald Trump is very good at appealing to certain types of people. Or not just certain types, but he actually has an appeal to many types of people. Sure. I mean, there's even things that he say that sometimes I'm like, oh, wait, what is this? You know? But I think that he is, I mean, it doesn't mean.
I'm kind of like this.
No, but what I'm saying is that, you know, I like to hear what people have to say. I don't immediately just judge someone based
dismiss
him, yeah. Right? I want to really understand his policies, understand what he's offering, because I do want to understand why people want to vote for him, and that's their choice. Sure. You know, just like I want my choice to vote for my candidate, I think they should have that choice. And so, but with that said, I think that he's very good at appealing to those fears that people have deep down inside.
Sure.
And to make them feel like, the country is being run amok by immigrants, it's being run amok by black people, it's being run amok by criminals, it's being run amok. And I think, and like I said, I think it goes back to when you are the status quo and you suddenly become fearful that you are going to lose that spot, or you're going to lose that positioning that you want. You want to fight back. And basically with January 6th, he had people convinced that the election had been stolen. Those people didn't go to the Capitol because they really believed that democracy had been sullied and the election had been stolen. So they believed that.
So do you think that they also believe that, the justice system that is currently in place, that, we've been following for years, which black people have been complaining about for ages, now all of a sudden is broken? I mean, and because a white man is being accused of something, so much so that if he doesn't win the election, blood is going to flow in the streets.
I mean,
what? I mean, that's a lot, but that's a whole conversation that we can have in a whole nother video. Let us know if that's something that you want to hear. But
I would rebut you, but we are talking about Octavia.
we are talking about. We'll go off on a whole tangent.
I won't do my rebuttal today. But back to the book. With a lot of people using these drugs to start fires, with a lot of people using the pyro drug that we just talked about, the fires are very common in the book. And the police system has failed and no one trusts them. And if I'm recalling correctly, I believe that they have to hire private police force. So you can imagine that only the wealthy are able to pay for this privatized police, and then public schools are privatized, as well as towns. Whole towns are privatized. And during this atmosphere of chaos, there's this political candidate that comes to rise, and his name is Christopher Donald. And he's elected on promises that he's going to dismantle government programs and bring back jobs. And this sounds a lot like our Project 2025, does it not?
It does sound like a Project 2025. Yeah. You're right.
And
you're right.
So we had done a video on that. So you guys might want to check that out on our channel when you get a chance. But the Parable of the Talents, however, is where we actually start to see the rise of the government, and the rise of the government in relation to what's kind of happening now with Donald Trump's campaign. And so the Parable of the Talents was published in 1998, and it opens up in 2032. And by then, various forms of indentured servitude and slavery was common, facilitated by these high-tech slave collars. The oppression of women has become extreme, and those women who express their opinions are literally labeled nags, and they can actually have their tongues cut out. And then, of course, people are addicted not only to designer drugs and this pyro drugs, but they're also addicted to these things called dream masks.
Wow. Actually, that sounds a lot like the virtual reality goggles that they're using now.
Yeah, it does. They are similar, but in the book, these masks generate virtual fantasies that are more centered around allowing the wearers to kind of submerge themselves in simpler, happier times. So it kind of works off of your memory. And then also news comes in the form of news bullets, which were these like flashy pictures and quick-witted verbal 1-2 punches in 40 words or less.
This is one of the things that I do recall vividly about the novel, where this high-tech slave collar, it brings to mind these electronic ankle bracelets that the penal system uses now, to put around the ankles of people who are outside of the prison.
Yeah, you're right. That does remind me. And you know what else that is happening?
What?
We voluntarily put slave collars on ourselves every day, in the form of smartwatches. The digital wearables, the glasses, and it's only a matter of time before these devices are going to be used the information they get from these devices is going to be weaponized against us as a way to control it.
Yeah, that's already happening, as social media has created some sort of digital avatar to predict, the things that, how we behave. They use this as influence our political, our social, our economic decisions, and all of that is being captured on these smart devices, but the news bullets you were talking about, it's literally come to pass.
And what do you mean?
I mean, well, you know, the part where people got their news in just 40 seconds or 40 words or less. Well, Silicon Valley has created that very thing with social media. You know, what is it? Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. This is where most of the news is consumed right now in a couple of minutes, instead of sitting through a 30-minute news show or reading a whole newspaper. You know, nuance is totally lost. You know, we get the headlines and we move ahead, we move on. And think about how social media is forcing everything into a 60-minute soundbite.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day because, you know, TikTok kind of started the whole concept of the 60-second short. And now, you know, YouTube and Facebook have followed suit. And it's like an attempt to keep us preoccupied. And, you know, so we feel like we're giving and receiving information, but in reality, we're just skimming the surface. You know, we're not even really doing that. So back to the book, The Parable of the Talents. The Donner administration still holds the power and has written off science. Also similar to Project 2025 with how they want to dismantle all the NOAA and all of that stuff. But that's sorry guys. But anyway, so then there's another threat that lurks, and that's a violent movement that's being whipped up by a new presidential candidate. And his name is Andrew Steele Jarrett. And I think he's a Texas senator, and he's like a religious zealot who's running on the platform, Make America Great Again.
Well, that's crazy. When did you say this book was written again?
1998. But
1998, but now written. That was published, right?
It was published in 98, and I believe that she had written it in the 1980s though.
Okay.
And so you know, Ms. Butler stated that, you know, but let me get this straight. She did say that she got the Make America Great slogan from her book, from a speech that she heard from Ronald Reagan in the 1980s.
Okay.
But even so, a lot of readers and people still regard the book as a sort of prophecy of the days that we're experiencing now.
Wow, but she could not have known about climate change back then. I mean, I know the other parallels with Project 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes it so eerie, is just the fact that she you know, it makes it eerie because, you know, people feel like that she was prophesying, because there was a lot of things in the book, in addition to the Make America Great slogan, that's shaping up now. Okay. But when you add Project 2025 into the equation along with Donald Trump, you know, it does sound just like the plot of her book. It's almost like they read her book and they were like, hey, this is what we should do. This is a great idea, lady.
I'm seeing many parallels to that in 2025, the Project 2025.
Yeah. So it's definitely to think about. But also, this is just a little tidbit of information I wanted to give you about her books, is that her books are actually being banned, along with a lot of other Black history content books that throughout school districts throughout the United States. And they recently banned her books in prison in Illinois, Kansas, and I think North Carolina, and that's just to name a few. And so this is kind of funny because when they interviewed the Kansas governor and they asked him, like, you know, because one of the prisoners actually was suing because they felt it was a violation of their rights, but you know how that went. And so the governor was like, you know, they asked the governor, why did you ban them? And he said, literally, they're full of racial stuff.
End quote.
And so, you know, we haven't quite entered this dystopia, but, you know, we're getting there. And there's been, of course, a boom in gated communities. In 2015, there was about 16 million American homes that lived behind walls. And 10 years later, you know, that figure had risen to about 25 million. I think we're also moving towards privatizing whole towns because, you know, you and I went on a vacation not too long ago in North Carolina, and there was a town that in order to get into the town, you had to go through a guard station. Right. And that was for the town, not for a community, but for the entire town.
And then, you know, add in all the security cameras with everyone watching. Everyone almost is like putting on some type of vigilante justice. You know, it's becoming very lawless. I mean, I would say so. Also, the Pew Research Center put out a study that found that only around a third of Americans thought police used appropriate force and treated racial groups equally. You know, this was down sharply from 4 years earlier, and they hinted that people were starting to hire private officers to police certain areas. Before long, you have to pay for the police to protect you, potentially. And, you know, I'm one that, you know, of course I'm Black, so I have to be weary of police officers, and I also tell my children to, manage themselves properly, because for some reason, when it comes to Black people, police officers tend to react differently, and
I mean, I think that goes back to just being Black in general. I think that you're never given the benefit of the doubt. You're immediately
seen as a threat.
You're immediately, from the time you can walk, almost, once, even like in the language of how, like, how you see like these little kids being hauled out from school in handcuffs, 9 years old, 6 years old, for doing things that are, okay, they might be misbehaving, they're having a temper tantrum, but they're being manhandled like they're actually adults to some extent. And they would never do that to white children. The white children are always given they're having a bad day, or, oh, they didn't eat breakfast this morning, or, oh, whatever. Right. And so I think that's the first problem with the policing. But I mean, I do think that also, we just live in a society where, the police, and I think that, in fact, I'm going to double back talk about this program on NPR, where they were saying that the reason why a lot of people are going to the private police is because they just feel like the police aren't trained. They feel like that the reason why you're getting things that happen, like just like what happened with Ta-Nehisi, where recently, where they feel like that's just a matter of poor training. But I think it's a mixture of just, long held stereotypes mixed in with stress, mixed in with racism. I think that
I mean, it's also mixed in with the level of pay, that they get to put themselves in harm's way the way that they do. Because, I also, on the other side of that, I have friends and brothers who are police officers. Sure. And, I worry about them all the time. I'm also very thankful for them in their duty, because they are, pretty much doing a duty. They're on the front lines, of I would say, societal safeties, to make sure that there's not a lot of lawlessness going on in the country. Because, how would we literally respond if we didn't have someone to call if someone broke into your house, or you got mugged, or or something like that? There is a level of safety, or a level of comfort that comes with being able to call someone that can come to your aid. Right. You know what I'm saying? There is a level of comfort in that. However, there is something that is comforting with, being able to protect yourself.
That's true.
and that's where this country is going. I can tell you that.
Well, just like, getting back to the book, The Parable of Talents, in Lauren's world, like I had stated earlier, the law enforcement, had been privatized, and the officers, they would collect the fee when they were responding, and the, cops, they basically offered little help to their customers. And so they were laying in, as these people went in and just kind of laid waste to these gated communities. But this police indifference is even prevalent today. When you think about the response times between, different marginalized communities, it's 2 and 3 times higher than it is in other communities.
Sure.
And, but I do want to kind of take a little bit of a turn with talking about, the book in the terms of it being a prophecy. And that is that I do think that the parallels between Octavia's books can be related back to Carl Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, which is that Jung proposed that at birth we all contain within our psyches the sum total of myth, symbol, and story.
So you're essentially saying anyone who spent enough time thinking about the end of civilization, would independently make different versions of the same story, because we all contain deep within us identical symbolic blueprint of rise and decline. I mean, we know how all of this is going to go down intuitively. Is that what they're saying?
I mean, maybe, but I find that there's something a little too neat and also a little pseudoscientific with Jung's collective unconsciousness, is that it seems more likely that any synchronicities between Butler's books today and current events is more due to sociological conditions in the 80s and 90s that was building to a futuristic potential.
Well, I think that she was a brilliant woman who put it together before anyone else did and immortalized her observations in a beautiful living testament of a book, you know, in her lifetime. And Butler insisted that the parable series was not intended as an augur. During a speech at MIT, she stated talent was not books about prophecy, but rather was a cautionary tale. You know, she finished that speech with, all I have to say is that I certainly hope not.
Yeah, and that's true. So she's basically saying herself that she didn't think it was necessarily a prophetic thing either, but she had put it together before anyone else had.
Sure, absolutely.
But anyway, before we go, I just wanted to mention that there's a Parable of the Sower opera by Ta-Nehisi Reagan, and I'm not entirely certain that the opera is still there's new shows, but you can find video clips of it right here on YouTube. Also, Ta-Nehisi Reagan is a very awesome musician. Check her out when you get a chance. And if you have not read the Parable series, please set aside some time to do so, or listen to it on audio tape if you have Kindle or audiobooks. Another one that we use is called Everend. It's called Scribd originally, and those are all great places to get really inexpensive.
Wait until they become a sponsor before you start giving all these.
But anyway, I digress. But anyway, but you will not be disappointed. And if you guys want, we can actually do an in-depth review of the books. We'd love to have a little book club night with y'all. And drop us a comment and just let us know if you're interested in that.
With that, guys, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we upload our next video. We also ask that you share our videos with your friends and family. That would mean the world to us. And lastly, but not least, thank you so much for your support. And until next time, we will bid you adieu. We'll bid you a good evening, a good night. Au revoir. Au revoir. Au revoir. Au revoir. Adios. Until next time.
Peace.
Peace.